What do you think the importance of video is in relation to your online advertising and website?
Who wants to take that one first?
I'd be happy to jump in.
All right.
It's a great question, actually, and probably something that should be included in all these presentations is we spend most of our time online now watching video. If you think about how much information's uploaded, how much video is uploaded to YouTube, Vimeo, all these other ones that are out there, we're streaming services, etc. And the one thing local sites tend not to have is video. And think of the About Us page. How many people want to go to a dealership website and read 3 paragraphs of copy about your dealership? But if you put a 90-second video there explaining it all, the likelihood that they would actually watch that video and learn about your history, most likely your family's history with the dealerships, what your value proposition is much greater. So I think my advice on that one would be get more video. We know it works with the car itself, right? Video's been used for brand advertising for years. But think of all the copy that exists on your site and how much limited time we have. Going back to the iPhone example, our phones aren't built to read on. They're built to watch video, interact very quickly, and think about what aspects of your content could you actually deliver through video, because that's the experience I think really matters. I know I spent a lot of time running automated video campaigns for dealerships, so we were able to find a way to programmatically run video ads, and they outperform paid search ads on YouTube for TrueView. So there's an advertising component to it, but think about how you could speak to your consumers through your website and what a 30-second, 60-second, 90-second video would do. I really think that's the future right there too, is less copy, more video, and really get that as the focal point.
Kevin or Darren, do you guys want to weigh in on that?
I think the only thing just to add is that the more opportunities you give the consumer to interact with your ad, the more likely he is to be coming back to your ad and be engaging with you. It doesn't have to, anything you can do to give him some more information about the vehicle is another opportunity to keep him interested in your car. And so video is increasingly ways that consumers just want to consume a mass amount of information. So anything you can do to reach out to them is going to help you.
Awesome. Darren?
Think like all I would say is they're both right. Think like a consumer. Shop your own site. Did you enjoy the experience? Did you get all the answers to your questions? We do a lot of work in this industry, but we forget what it's really like to actually go buy a car, right? Because we don't have to do that. We just walk to the front desk or we do an internal employee deal, so we get to skip that all the time. If you think like a consumer, you're going to find that that's exactly right. If I don't want to read a bunch of copy. Quite honestly, I'm certainly not going to do that on my phone, right? The more engaging the content can be in a condensed format, I think you win.
Fantastic. Thanks very much. We've got a question over here again, so hold on. Microphone for you.
Hi, are there any stats that any of you have that give an understanding of how many folks are purchasing vehicles at home before they even get to the dealership? Do you know what I mean? Like, they pretty much know what they're going to buy. Mm-hmm. They've made the decision because they've done all their work online, and they really, the dealership is really just a means to an end. They don't really need a whole lot of questions answered. Any stats out there?
So the one stat when we've done dealer intercepts is about 15% of all the cars that were sold at the dealers in the set were sold to A, people who have never contacted the dealer before, and B, people who showed up at the dealership for the very first time. So that customer is essentially showing up to say, that red car over there, that's the one I want. What do I need to do? Let's go. I don't necessarily need to do a test drive. I don't need to look at another bunch of other things. I don't want to sit in your office for 4 hours. I just want to buy that car, right? And I have another meeting in 2 hours, so if we can speed this up. So increasingly, consumers are making up their mind and they're showing up to the dealer and they're thinking the dealer is very much like any other retailer where I can just wander in, I can pick up the thing that I want and I can leave with it. So it's, that number kind of surprised me given what a car costs. But 15% of, in this dealer set, 15% of sales went to people who've never talked to a dealer and never showed up before. We've only asked the question once, but I have to think that it's increasing given the exponential increase in amount of information that's out there and the comfort that people have, doing things online, what information that they'll give out and how much of the process they'll start to work through. It can only go up.
I'll add to that one because I'm actually pretty passionate on this subject. I don't have a lot of macro data that these guys would have, but when I hear that number, the first thing that I think of is don't design a process for 15% of your customers. That means 85% are still doing the same things that people have done in the car business for a long time, which is, and we've done analysis on our side because we track the VDP level as well, they come in looking at one car and they buy a different car for a variety of different reasons, credit, trade-in value, all these things that are built into the process at the dealership. I happen to be, even though I'm a digital guy and I'm a data guy and I'm sitting there talking about all the things that you can gain insights on, I am not one of the people that think in my lifetime, literally, I'm 46 years old, but in my lifetime, I don't think we're going to go to this direct consumer to OEM type of channel in mass, right? There's still new dealerships being built every single day. No proprietor or owner is building a multi-million dollar facility thinking, oh, I hope we can stick around for another 5 or 6 years, right? I think we're going to be here in the retail business for a long time. There's going to be a channel, a subset of customers that choose to do direct engagement and try to eliminate as much of the process as possible, but it has not reached a critical mass point yet.
But I'll add to that.
We've got, sorry, there's one question back here, then we're going to come up front to you. Okay. Here we go.
For those of us that work at like rural dealerships, we see a lot of blue collar guys, senior citizens, farmers that just aren't really into all this stuff. So how do you focus on that and not leave those types of customers behind?
Good question.
Great question.
Well, I'll speak to that just because I come from a pretty rural setting myself in New England. Some of the same principles apply, right? And that's why I've tried to shift. I spent years on the data side, and digital's everything, everyone's there, and then you take a step back, you're like, well, it's a part of our lives, and it's made parts of our lives maybe easier, right? Like my parents use cell phones more out of necessity than as like a function of their daily life. They're still researching online. They're still going to certain aspects of it. And that's why personally for me, the brand experience has become obsessive in some ways because we've lost that. And those same blue collar workers, I did a lot of work in Australia for a couple years and bringing dealer.com to Australia. And Australia is very similar to Canada in that you got a major population along the coast and then in the rural areas. Very old and traditional. And what we worked with those dealers on is, hey, they might start their shopping process online and just do a little research. They might skip that entirely. Can you use digital anywhere inside there? They still check email. They still might get a text message from you back and forth. Can you simplify different aspects of it through? But don't actually get so caught up in all the advances in technology where you erode that personal experience. Because when I was there in Australia, they'd talk about how in the blue collar settings and especially on the farm side, basically the person would come in, the guy would come in, purchase all the vehicles in person right there, and then take them all home, and that was it. That was the whole transaction right there. There's still digital components that can exist there. The follow-up, did you call them or email them a week later? Make sure that they're happy with their purchase. Sell them any aftermarket accessories. Hey, it's been 30 days. Is there anything in your vehicle that's not working for you right now? Do you need side rails on your trucks? Do you need a tonneau cover? Think of beyond that transaction process itself. And again, that's why I think that brand experience and how you treat that customer and what you do for them really becomes essential. It's different than data and digital, but it's imperative for dealers that they really treat their businesses as a local entity and connect with their consumers at that local level.
Only thing I would add from a data standpoint is in looking at, we've done obviously a lot of studies, rural markets and heavy suburban populations, and the reverse logic of what you might think on the outset has been true as it relates to desktop versus mobile. And what we're seeing is that, and it makes sense when you think about it, when there's heavier mobile engagement in the rural populations than there is in the suburban populations. Because when you're in a suburban population and you're at the office and you've got a desktop and you've got people that are sitting there online all day long, there's a lot of engagement there. Folks that are out there in a more rural environment, they've all got phones. They may not be working on a laptop, may not be working on a desktop at their house, but everybody's got a phone. So again, as the takeaway, make sure that mobile experience is good for everybody.
Kevin, do you want to weigh in on this? No, thank you. Excellent. That's a good call. Here we go. Next question.
This is specifically for Darren. I think a lot of us are interested in the transparency product you're talking about. We live in a world where we have dynamic IP addresses and things like that. How quickly, this is two-part, how quickly does your algorithm reverse look up that IP address and link it up with the previous one.
Sure.
And secondly, as far as customer traffic flow, you mentioned you can state whether they've been on the website and things like that and how it transfers to a sale. But does it actually show where those people came in from? Was it from Google? Was it from Facebook? Was it things like that?
Yeah, so there's two parts to that. First of all, just to be clear, we don't do IP matching, right? The anchor, and it's the reason why in our methodology, exactly to your point, the IP address at your house where you guys live doesn't change that often. A carrier may change it every now and again, but for the most part, that holds. If you're trying to do IP matching on a mobile device, it can change as frequently as every 3 or 4 days, right? Which is why on mobile, we don't care about the IP, I care about the device ID and where else that ID shows up. Does it show up enough times based at the actual IP address, at the physical address where you live, so I can say, hey, that phone belongs with Darren Haygood at that address, and oh, by the way, that phone showed up at this address where he works, and at this Starbucks, strangely, every single morning, right? So that's why we do it that way, okay? So it's not IP matching, the anchor is the address, and all the devices associated with that, specifically for that reason. As it relates to that consumer journey, it's a question I get everywhere I go, right? Can you show me where else they went? And the simple answer is no. And I would stipulate to you, we're not trying to map, because we're not doing cookie behavior. I'm not trying to follow the consumer along their path. Instead, I'm looking at a yes, no. Are they a match for this publisher? Now, what was your name? Justin. I think where we're headed in the next couple of years is the ability for all of the companies to equally share all their IP data so we can tell this very rich attribution story. But where we sit today, I'll introduce you to all the attorneys at all the different companies, because we're not in a place yet where everybody's willing to push all their chips in the middle of the table and say, hey, let's see who wins. We're not there yet, but I'm excited that where we are gives you the ability for the same comparative time frame for you all to do that work. So any digital property, all we would need is the IP log. And then you'd get multiple transparency reports from us, but you could do a very simple cost of sale calculation, because not every provider costs the same amount of money, right? But we're kind of Switzerland in all this. We are not doing comparative analysis. We're not trying to tell you, hey, spend money here versus here. Instead, I'm showing the value of that audience down to the transactional level, and then what is the unique subset of that audience. Make sense?
Does that answer your question, Justin? Are you good? Yep. Other questions? How about this side of the room? Okay, no, right there. That's what I was pointing at. This side of the right here. Oh, that was amazing. Let's do that. I was going to reach over here. Here you go.
How does brand consistency work, keeping on the OEM's brand versus trying to stand out in the local market? What can we do as dealerships to stand out while piggybacking on somebody else's dollar?
Yeah, it's a great question, because that is it. I mean, you have compliance, right? You got to stay within the compliance regulations that brands set out in order to unlock those co-op dollars. And you don't want to differentiate too much, right? If you're Ford, you're not going to paint your dealership red. Ford has a blue brand. But we kind of misinterpret sometimes brand as being, well, as long as I have a logo and I've put up my website, it's okay. Brand comes down to what the first experience on the website is. You start splashing them with incentives and offers, chat icons and everything else. And it'd be the equivalent of walking to a dealership and someone walking up to you and saying, here's all of my incentives, like right up in your face. And then a person coming out to the side and being like, how can I help you today? And then you get to the next page, how can I help you today? And you're like, I'm just getting a cup of coffee. So think of, a lot of you have built very good brand experiences when you get into the store, right? You have a greeter. Hey, how can I help you out today? Let me walk you around and show you the vehicles. You learn about them. Are you a family? Are you a couple? Are you looking to upgrade? What are you doing? The website has just done the opposite. It's just like constantly pounding them with offers that are not relevant to them. So the brand's two sides. One, you got to simplify the website. We don't need all that clutter. We don't need all that stuff that exists out there today. And then the dealership experience is exactly what I said with Tesla. Tesla actually has a very poor dealership experience. And I'll elaborate on that. I just went on a 7-hour trip in a Tesla, and you're fighting down to find all the superchargers, get free electricity. Every single experience at the dealership was a poor experience where the superchargers were. Coffee machines that were out, refrigerators with no water in them, no one to greet you to say, how are you doing today? One of the worst brand experiences that's out there. On the flip side, their buying process was amazing. I got to their site, the shopping was very simple. Going back to your question about how many people are going to, predetermine which car they're going to buy. Well, if we actually make it simpler for them and learn about them, imagine if they got to your website and it said, "Who are you and what are you looking for?" "I'm a family of 6, I'm looking for a minivan," and that's all the offers you're going to show them. What a better experience that would be than showing them a sports car because it has a great incentive right now. You're like, that has nothing to do with me. So you can just ask them a couple questions like you would within your dealership. So there's kind of this inverse effect happening where dealerships provide a better in-store brand experience, and I still think you should audit it and check it, but the Teslas of the world and the Ubers and Amazons are creating this frictionless buying process that makes it really easy to go through there. And I think the goal of the dealer is to say, listen, Ford does not want to go out of business. Chrysler does not want to go out of business. They're going to make sure the brand experience of the vehicle itself is good. The product's good. The 30-second TV spots that end up on the Super Bowl tell the right story. They've got that covered. You don't have to as much anymore worry about, I have to sell them against a Chrysler versus a Ford. It's still there. They've already showed up at your dealership. They're interested in the brand that you're selling there today. How do you actually facilitate that transaction? And again, make sure that whole experience from start to finish is really good. And then I'll say it again, the 90 days after the purchase in any product you buy is the most important time that you could ever have with your customer. If you go that first week without calling your customer and checking in 30 days later, this is when they're thinking about all the accessories that they didn't buy during that time. You will get way more yield on your gross post-purchase than you did during the purchase itself too, through service, parts, etc. So that's what I think. Focus on that dealership experience, simplify the website, and really leverage the assets that the brands have out there.
Thanks, Dave. That was awesome. Actually, as you were speaking, you were checking on your iPad. You were checking out the consumer experience and living it here on Tesla. That's how quick it went. And then you went back and compared it to your site. And are you still on the Tesla? How's it going?
You can you almost will accidentally put a deposit down on one because it's so easy. And that's what I did. I was like, holy shit, I think I just bought one. And then you wake up the next morning, you're like, how far down this process am I? And can I get back out of it?
You wake up the next morning and you own Whole Foods.
Yeah.
That's what happens.
Yeah, exactly. The same thing happens.
That's right.
Questions? Any other questions? We got time for one more question. Who wants to bring it home? One more question. You guys are giving thumbs up, which is a good thing, but do you have a question? No. Any more questions?
Yeah, here.
Right up here.
We do. Here we go.
Thank you. Hi. I have a question about 360 photography. So is that something that every dealer is going to have to do now? Is it the new thing that we're all going to have to adapt? I have 2 questions, actually. That's my first one.
I think that as more consumers want to spend more time online and sort of make those decisions online, similar to video, anything you can give them that gives them a more well-rounded, a more complete view of the vehicle, inside, outside, around. Like think of them as like when they show up at your dealership, they're going to walk around the car, right? You want them to basically be able to replicate that experience online and push them further and further down the process. Because if one dealer does and the other dealer doesn't, that might be enough for the consumer to say, I'm actually feeling a little bit more comfortable with that vehicle, and go down that road. So it's constantly, the amount of information a consumer is willing to look at online is constantly increasing, and dealers just need to keep kind of upping their game. Otherwise, you get your lunch eaten by the next dealer who will do that, and then to the previous point, is the consumer will show up and he's ready to buy.
I'll add to that because, again, I think it's important. When you come to conferences like this and come to these types of events, you walk away with some immediate takeaways saying, hey, I can go back and do that at the dealership tomorrow, right? I think it's, and I don't know your dealership obviously at all, but if 360 photos is the only issue that you have, you are crushing everybody.
Yeah.
Right? So I would prioritize based on things you need to knock out and know that that is somewhere on the list, but it's probably not at the top.
If your ad looked like the one at the top of my presentation, you're doing a great job. If your ad looked at the bottom, 360 is probably not where you should start.
This is kind of just for my own interest, but virtual reality, it's something that people talk about daily. It's a big thing. The big tech people are all getting on board. Will it affect the car business? What will it look like? Will it, I don't know, what do you guys think? I guess it's kind of just picking your brain on virtual reality.
If there's anybody who lives in virtual reality, it'd be this man right here, so I'm going to have Dave answer that question.
Yeah, it's a tough one. It's I had the benefit of, I'm not a gamer. I don't use video games. We have little TV, so most of my experiences digitally are truly functional, I would say. And I put on the Oculus Rift at a Facebook summit they invited me to, and I was like, wow, I could actually play a video game if it was in this capacity. It was a really amazing experience, and I think it bridges what you were talking about with a 360 view of a car versus what a static image would look like of a car. And I think this segue right there now is video, right? Virtual reality is something the manufacturers are going to really have to think about, and convincing someone to buy a BMW versus a Mercedes-Benz. Virtual reality could actually be that differentiator. But we're still dealing with vehicles that you want to get in and drive and be a part of. So you still need that physical experience. I think that the gap here is video. I think it fills the gap really well because I think the industry is like, wow, we're going to go from photography on websites to virtual reality. And you're like, wait, we missed this whole middle layer, which is video. And going back to your first question, one thing I've always wanted to experiment with is using a little bit of user-generated content that's a little more polished to show how happy people are in a vehicle. Because I can look at a vehicle in a variety of different ways, but most of your influence comes from asking a friend, what was it like buying a minivan? Or did that sport activity vehicle give you the space you needed versus sport utility vehicle? And those are questions you can't answer just through a paragraph or a photo. But imagine if your dealership did a quick series on, we're going to profile a customer each week and why they bought this car. So we bought this minivan because, and I don't own a minivan, but I'm just picking it out there, but because a lot of people have that stigma of getting over it, and then they get it and they're really happy. So imagine if you had a 60-second video talking with a consumer about that. I bought the minivan because I can fit all the bikes in the back. I get 3 rows, It's got USB cables in the front so I can charge. That video might sell the car better than anything else you have out there, and it's replacing the salesperson with your own customer. So experimenting with video and using that as a storytelling is really good. The other thing is once you create video at your dealership, whether it's user-generated, working with the consumer, very rough, or if you do professional video, you can now transfer that into a monetizable asset. So you can actually take that and you don't have to pay someone to create new ads for you. You can go to YouTube. YouTube has a tremendous targeting potential. You can set my geolocation, the type of videos I want to be associated with. And the reason Google's now doubling down on video over search, they know fewer people are searching. We've kind of exacerbated how many different things we can search for. Now we use our app, Google Maps, to find what we're looking for. And now YouTube has become the predominant focus for Google because they're like, everyone's watching video. We need to get in there. So it is one thing I really emphasize today. Use video. It shows the essence of your dealership. Back to your brand question. Video really shows the brand of your dealership. Do a series of, get to meet and greet the service staff. What's it like showing up for a service appointment? So you can really start to exemplify that. I think virtual reality is out there. I think at a local dealership level, the video is what's going to differentiate you in the future.
And just to kind of wrap things up here, because I just thought about this, the question you were asking earlier about the OEM to local type of marketing that you're doing, because you're walking away going like, well, how can we sell our brand? What is our brand locally? I would just, I'm going to piggyback on what Dave just said, take the OEM message for that make and model and then just tell the story locally, right? If it's capacity on your minivan, right, and it stores bikes, that's exactly the same message that Chrysler is selling, right, for the Pacifica, but find a real person to retell the story locally, right? If I'm a BMW store, if I'm a Highline store, I know Mike back there just participated in like a road rally thing that you just did, right? So you would be the local example of the make and model that you drive because he's the enthusiast that's performance and used it for X, Y, or Z. And that's a very interesting and compelling story that you can tell on your website that doesn't cost you anything, right? So find the local version of what's already being told at the OEM level. And now you've got brand consistency and you've got local content and messaging that makes it relevant and impactful for the dealer and the consumer.
And that's what gets shared too, right? Imagine putting a video out there that gets 1,000 shares on your local Facebook page. There's no promotion, no incentive, no piece of inventory that is going to get shared like that. But I think you're going to see your dealership will start to become more exciting and more engaged with your customers when you actually show those stories and really engage them at that level. It's a good time to really evaluate. And the last point I'll make on the kind of the channel-specific marketing, we know 90% of the digital ads go to Google and Facebook. They're the predominant source out there. We can't get fixated on just focusing on these channels alone. We know marketplaces are really where the future is. People want aggregation, they want centralized shopping areas out there. So start thinking about the assets you can collect and promote out there, and don't worry so much about, well, how does Yahoo perform against Google versus Bing versus this versus that? You're always going to be 2 steps behind the industry and the consumer, and by the time you catch up, it's too late. So just provide good content, provide a good experience. The rest will really follow from there. I really believe it.
Awesome, guys. Thanks very much. These guys can talk automotive all day long. Round of applause.